But first, it is Wednesday, so it means school runnings. Now, school runnings is something we do each and every week here on this show, and it is just dedicated to talking about various issues around being a parent. The trials and tribulations, the challenges, the excitement, the energy, the inspiration, the innovation that comes from, having little people in our lives and how they influence us and how we influence them. Okay, with me this week, star of Ackley Bridge and Shakespeare and Hathaway, Joyner is here, who's a mother of 10-year-old twins, Edie and Fred. And we also have presenter, podcaster, film enthusiast, music aficionado, Edith Bowman. Her podcast, Soundtracking, is available on iTunes. New episodes of Life Cinematic will be returning to BBC 4 soon. Keep an eye out for that. We'll make sure that we'll tell you as soon as that drops. Edith's also a mum to two boys, Rudy, 12, and Spike, who is 7. Good afternoon to both of you.
Hi.
Yes, indeed. This is going to be good. I know this is going to be good. Okay, so these are some of the subjects we're going to be discussing today. As always, the three of us are having a conversation which you are very much a part of. So just feel free, through the means of technology, whatever you have in the palm of your hand right now, to text on 85058, or you can call us 08085 909 693. Today, we're going to be talking about the kind of parent you thought you would be before you had children. Oh, yes, this is interesting territory to explore. Escapism, because let's face it, we all need that at the moment. And also, what's the soundtrack to your home? Any prizes for guessing why we're talking about this today? Could have one of our guests have influenced this? I don't know. Songs or music that remind you of your family or children. On Saturday, I think it was in the afternoon, we put on Fontaine's DC. Me and my 11-year-old daughter jumped around, pogoing around our room to Televise Mind, which is, if you don't know that song, it's a fantastic song. And we just had a moment. We listened to Dove's new album, and we just had this great moment having music together in our room. A bit difficult with my son, who's more into the kind of grime and rap stuff. Not really a great family sing along with Heady One. It's not really one for the four of us together talking about how the thug life chose him. He didn't choose the thug life. Okay, right. 85058 is the text number, 08085 909 693. And talking of that, congratulations, Heady One. Looks like he's going to have a number 1 album on Friday. Okay, let us begin, Joyner and Edith Bowman. Okay, quality time we're going to start with, right? Because we all know it's important. It can be hard to find. Now, if you follow me on social media, you know that I love driving my son to and from sports fixtures. It's in fact one of the ways we actually get to have a proper conversation with each other. Quite mad conversations as well. Edith, where do you get that time, that kind of conversation time, which isn't kind of in the midst of doing something else and trying to have a conversation, but actually having some quite quality time?
Well, it's quite interesting. You always do that thing when you pick them up from school where you're like, how was your day? What have you been up to? And the kind of...
Good, thanks.
Stuff is normally the response I get from everything.
Exactly.
It normally involves like, I had what they had for lunch and what they did at playtime. And like, can we talk? What did you do that didn't involve food or just hanging out? But I find it's quite interesting because my two boys are quite different in terms of... Rudy's up like the lark in the morning. He's really sprightly. So I love when, it's morning time and we can have a kind of really nice conversation first thing in the morning, whereas Spike would stay up till midnight if we let him. So it's kind of bedtime and reading stories with him that we'll talk about things as well. But I find the stimulation of certain things can be the things that can start really interesting conversations. So be that films, for example. We've watched a lot of films over lockdown, and it's really interesting some of the subject matter that comes up in after film, and we'll try and talk about it as well. Even Bake Off, we're obviously obsessed with watching Bake Off every week, so we kind of record it on a Tuesday and watch it on a Wednesday. Right. So I'm looking forward to tonight's episode. And so it's even that kind of can stimulate kind of interesting conversation. So yeah, they're both different. It's quite interesting, the different sort of nocturnal kind of abilities of Spike, and then the early larkness of Rudy can almost, their brains switch on at different times.
Jo, where do you find that time for 10-year-old twins? Wow.
I would agree. I mean, they're all little individuals, aren't they? So they never all want the same time or the same moment. But yeah, the driving to sport one is interesting. I remember hearing a psychologist saying that it's a really good time to talk to your kids in the car because you're not making full eye contact with them.
Yes.
They tend to be a little bit more open, or they feel a bit more relaxed about kind of revealing stuff. And I find a similar time for that, particularly with my little boy, is last thing at night, because I think there's that kind of stillness and the quiet and it being darker in the room. And the difficulty is that when they get to about 10 or 11, they're old enough to sort of send them upstairs and ignore them, really. You don't have to do the kind of 2 hours of putting them to bed that it takes when they're toddlers, really. And so if you're not careful, you can kind of give them a kiss downstairs, send them up and they do their own reading. But actually, I have to make a conscious, reminder to myself, especially during lockdown, because we've spent all day with them, haven't we? So we kind of feel like we've done our innings. Yeah. But actually to pop up now and then and just have that little, you're all right, darling, night, night, and sort of sit there quietly for a minute, because then he's a real chatterbox anyway, but something will come up that didn't come up on the way home, after that grunt after school of, no, it was all right. Suddenly you find out all sorts that went on that day, because there's that little stillness, I think.
It's that thing also, when they're not listening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or they don't think, they forget you're there.
Yeah, and I think it's the same eye contact thing. I think just having the lights sort of down and them not feeling the pressure of you really asking, I don't know, it seems to open them up. But also watching things, you're right, Edith, we've watched a lot lately, but one of the best ones we watched was Social Dilemma, which my little girl wasn't interested in watching, but my little boy, I said to him, this dad said this is really worth watching. Do you want to watch it with me? There were a lot of big words, so we kept stopping. We kept pausing, in fact, to just discuss what that man had just said or what she had just said.
Why is your other half not good with long words?
No, he'd already seen it. That's very good. Well, yeah, maybe he isn't. Maybe he needed to watch it with me so that he could get it explained. You're right, you might be onto something there.
It wasn't your kids. They didn't ask for it to be paused once. That's the irony of the whole situation. Yeah.
I used to love putting myself forward to be the taxi driver. I mean, we haven't had so many parties and stuff recently for the kids, in terms of the limited numbers of social gatherings. But I used to love nominating myself as kind of designated taxi driver for either taking a bunch of kids or picking them up from parties, because there's nothing better than having kind of 4 kind of kids in the back, and I'd let them kind of pick a track each on like Spotify or whatever, and just hearing the choices they'd make, but also just eavesdropping in on those conversations, because they forget mum's driving. It's brilliant.
That's so good. That is really part of the thing. Is having the best conversations with your kids is presumably not looking at them in the eyes, because it feels like an interrogation rather than a conversation.
It's keeping it casual, isn't it? A lot of people say that, like he's talking about baking or doing an activity keeps it all casual. It's a good time to bring up something that might have been quite important that you've been wanting to broach, isn't it? Because they're almost off guard, or they don't, like you say, they don't feel interrogated.
How are you gauging what's appropriate and not appropriate for them to watch? I mean, Edith, with your eldest who's on the cusp of teenagehood, then there's a kind of, certainly amongst my sons, he's 13 in November, is that, he's got mates who've already seen 15s and 18s, right? They've seen films like that. And we're very much, that's not happening, right? But he's seen Stranger Things, for instance, when he was like 11 or 12. So how are you doing with that?
Well, it's kind of really interesting because with the younger one as well, because his big brother's watching stuff, he thinks that he can automatically watch things. So there's, sometimes we'll do kind of split viewing, where one of us will go up to the bedroom, our room, with one of them to watch something, and then the other one, because it is tricky sometimes. But like sometimes I do think that my 7-year-old has seen like way more stuff than Rudy saw at his age, just because, I don't know, we become kind of slightly not lax in it, but obviously we think about what it is that they're seeing. So like the Avengers films and things like that. It's Marvel. It's kind of,
it's cartoony.
It's that world that he's familiar with, and and he loves reading the comics and stuff anyway. So that's kind of okay. But like, for example, Jojo Rabbit was one actually that I sat with Rudy and watched, which I just thought was an extraordinary film from Taika Waititi, and it was really interesting because at school, this was I think this was just after lockdown started, we watched it, because one of the things that they were doing, because we were more across what they were studying in school then, because we had these lists of what to help them with. And so the Holocaust was something that they were reading about and learning about. And I just thought this would be a really interesting thing to show him, to see what the conversations were off the back of it. It was incredible how it ignited a real curiosity and a really important line of questioning from him as well. But that wouldn't be something that I think a 7-year-old would be able to kind of handle. There's so much comedy and beauty in it as well.
Yes.
But yeah, you've got to take it case by case, I think, to be honest.
Joe, how are you with that?
We watched that one as well, Edith. We must have been doing similar topics because we were doing World War II. And they are a really useful tool, aren't they, to stop and talk about. We watched Jojo Rabbit. So my 2 are 10. They're 10 and a half, really. And they absolutely loved it. And it did, I think they were right. It was good because they're kind of not quite ready to grasp the enormity of how horrific those things were. So they didn't find them as distressing as you or I possibly do, in a way. And we had a similar thing watching Hidden Figures, because one of their topics was space. And, there was just such brilliant films out there to spark conversation about things like that. And it really did make it clear how ridiculous, they couldn't believe it. They're so far removed from the idea that a woman wouldn't be able to go to the toilet in the same room as someone else, was just beyond their ken. And it was, it was a brilliant place to start. But they're quite good at self-policing as well, my 2, actually. If I say to them, look, this is a 12, and there's a lot of naughty language that we know we're not going to use. If you're all cool with that, we're all cool with it. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Or I might say, there's some graphic scenes. If we see them coming, we'll pause it, and they'll hide behind a pillar and then come back, if they want to. But they usually want to.
How reliable do you find that rating system, though? Because it's certainly not.
Well, it's hilarious
across the board.
when you think about the original Star Wars and New Hope, it was a U. I mean, I'm sure like the burning corpses of his aunt and uncle in the background is like, it should be kind of.
It's so true.
It's interesting.
What was
how
Empire Strikes Back? Because that is so dark.
I think it was a PG, that one. It wasn't a U. But it's interesting how over time the certification process obviously is tightened up. But then do you go back and you reclassify films? It's kind of it's a
tricky one, isn't it? But my mum's premise used to be, when I was younger, that if it was because it was a bit sexy, it wasn't really a problem because that was about love. But violence was a different thing. And I find that when I look at the ratings, some things can be rated, 12, when I think they're really quite graphic, violently. Yeah. And rated older because somebody, actually maybe goes to bed, but it's not particularly graphic either, and I think, she was onto something there, actually, because I'd rather they kind of, watch someone having a bit of a kiss and a cuddle than saw somebody's guts being ripped out.
We did this on Monday's show, and I thought it's quite nice to ask you both this question. Have you ever watched something with your own parents that has made you cringe? Or they've taken you to something not realising, or you've sat in the living room watching something and then suddenly it's been like, oh, wow, no. Someone texted in on Monday and said I don't know, it would have been in the 80s or something, that their elderly, very religious aunts took them what they thought was a nice kind of cultural European film called Emmanuel, which didn't work out too well for 15 minutes.
I'm really lucky, actually. I think we just watched a few soaps and then we just disappeared, did our own thing. So that would be horrific.
Edith?
Yeah, I mean, I've quite recently, actually, The Shape of Water, the Guillermo del Toro film, which is beautiful, but it has this scene in a bathtub with Sally Hawkins' character that I watched. I'd totally forgotten about it and watched it with my mother and father-in-law. But then Trainwreck, the Amy Schumer film, with my mum and dad, and it was like, I'm just going to go make some tea. Anybody want a sandwich? Anyone for
or a roast?
Oh my God, don't. Oh.
Okay, that
I don't remember those moments as a kid.
Right.
I don't have that. I didn't have that baggage of that understanding of being embarrassed about stuff as much as kind of now's just slightly,
So we've got this all to look forward to when they're kind of 16, 18, and we'll sit down and watch something which is, an 18, right? Yeah. And something's going to be going on and you're just going to be like, oh, gosh, we don't have to think about that right now. But for those people who've got kids of that age, 85058 is that. How do you do that? Do you just not do it? Do you just go, well, we're not watching that? We're not going to sit down and have a Game of Thrones marathon.
Let's watch Avengers again.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's watch Sing.
I love that film.
Let's do that rather than do this. Okay, right. Let's move on to talk about the parent you thought you'd be. Remember, 85058 is the text number. Just anytime, just send us a text on how you're feeling about what we're talking about. Joe, listen, you're very open about your experience with IVF, and that's how, of course, you had your twins. Now, you've previously spoken about how, because you had to wait to become a mum, you had time to think about the type of parent you would be. What and how was that different? What's the difference between perception and reality?
Well, it took so long that by then you've kind of longingly watched so many lovely friends and family parenting that you've had plenty of time to go, oh, yeah, definitely going to do that. Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. Or equally, we're never doing that. So you kind of got this catalogue of ideas, I think. But of course, like your birth plan, that pretty much goes out of the window, doesn't it? I remember a good friend saying to me who had twins, she said, and I did think I would be chaotic and bohemian like my life is, travel anywhere, slim and put them in your backpack, off we go, carefree, not too overplanned. And she just went to me, it doesn't matter how bohemian you thought you were going to be with twins, you cannot do that. You have to have a routine and you're going to have to be organised because otherwise it goes wrong and it goes wrong in stereo. And she's so right. So I think I was going to be more relaxed and a little bit less kind of, for the first early years, I was going to be more relaxed. And actually I had to be much more organised than I thought because, the wheels come off. Otherwise you have to kind of be eating every 3 hours before tantrums happen. And you can't be, it's just chaos.
Yeah, twins is a whole different level. I don't want to go there. Or what that is. It's hard enough with the 19 months between my two. Edith?
I don't know. I didn't really think about, I grew up in a big family. My mum's one of 7 girls.
Wow.
So we all grew up really close to each other. So I was part of a big gang of kids and was always babysitting my cousins and all that kind of stuff. So I was always around kids that I never really thought about what I would be like as a parent. And the one thing that I did that I remember Tom and I talking about was about kind of, how scared we were and how do we do this? But the idea that, he was, with Rudy anyway, our first, was that, he's coming into our world and we want him to feel part of our lives rather than him dictating to us. And I remember someone giving me one of those Gina Ford books or something, and it scared the hell out of me. And so I had to stop reading it after about 4 pages, and it's just like, no thanks.
We ended up using it to prop the cot up for reflux.
Yeah, I think I used it as firewood. But it was just like, I mean, I'm really bad at being told what to do. I think that might have been part of it as well. But it just didn't feel instinctive. And my mum gave me the best advice. Was like, it's trial and error. You don't know what kind of parent you're going to be until you do it. And it's fine to fail. It's fine to get things wrong. It's fine to not be perfect and everything you expected or wanted it to be. You kind of just. And the other thing as well is asking for help. That is a really important thing. Is don't be scared to ask for help. That's the thing that I was really bad at. I remember one time Tom was on tour and I was kind of like, I was having a bit of a moment and I was just struggling because I went back to work really quick as well, kind of being a freelancer and doing what I did. It was like it wasn't to prove a point to anyone else apart from myself. And I just remember my mum must have heard something in my voice. And the next thing, like about 4 hours later, my doorbell rang. My mum had jumped on the first kind of train down to London. And she was just at my front door. And that was the moment where she said to me, she's like, you have to ask for help. You have to know when it is getting too much or you're struggling or you don't know what to do, ask for help. There's people around who can help you both, if that's on a kind of family and friends level, but also if it goes deeper than that and you know that there is something there that you're not quite sure how to shake.
Did you have to ask for help from anyone, Joe?
Yeah. Edith's so right. It's such an important thing. And thank God that we are lucky enough to have our mums around to have been there for those moments. And my mum did a couple of night shifts, when the wheels were really coming off my husband and myself, because like Edith, I went back to work too quickly. I don't know why really. And my husband went back literally the week after I got home from hospital. So, he was working, we were working, and we were trying to keep some sort of sanity through a massive lack of sleep. And my mum came and did a night shift. And I just remember us both feeling like new people. She came, she had the twins through the night, feeding them every 3 hours. I think they were on then. And it saved us. But she also gave me a piece of advice that I always pass on because I was grateful to have it again, which is that in those early days with kids, there is always, no matter how sane and loving and caring and intelligent and kind you might be, there will come a moment very probably, where you just think you're going to scream and throw everything out of the window. And she said to me, at that point, make them safe and walk away, which is what she meant about, same as Edith's mum, really, ask for help, And I remember it was thick with snow and they were screaming, both of them in stereo. They'd been fed, they'd been changed. I couldn't think of anything else to try, but I couldn't, I was on edge. I was still feeding at the time, part feeding. So, it really does tear into you, that noise. And I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I'm going to explode. I'm just going to scream at them in a minute. And so I remember turning them both in their Moses baskets to face the French windows, walking out of my front door, I think in my bare feet in the snow, walking round to the top of my garden where I could see through the window. And I could see their little pink faces still screaming, but I couldn't hear them anymore. So I could get my breath and I could calm down and sort of take stock. And I wouldn't have done that. I don't know what I would have done if my mum hadn't have said to me, everybody has that moment. Don't worry. It's perfectly normal. It's fine. It doesn't mean you're a bad mother. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just make them safe, walk away, get help. And it's invaluable, isn't it? Mm.
Wow. That's really, really good advice. Really good advice. Possibly not for your toenails afterwards if you've been in the freezing cold. You look like Ranulph Fiennes after that.
No, take your flute shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Do that. Okay, so that really, really helped. Did you do that then? Presumably on a number of occasions you had to do that, Jo, because it's not just once it would have got on top of you in that kind of early years.
That was the one that I remember the most because it was so early on. And then after that, I think, if you're lucky enough to have a partner who is working with you with these things, then you kind of have those moments between the two of you where you pick each other up. There were definitely times when Neil would come home from work and I would be sitting on the stairs going, she hates me. I don't know what I've done, but she's just screaming at me and I've tried everything, and he would just go, all right, go away, I'll take over. And vice versa, because we've both been lucky enough to swap roles. So we've got quite an equal household in that respect. So he really understands when when they've got the better of you. And equally, when I'm away working and I come back, I understand when he's, run ragged or tired.
That conversation that you and Tom had, Edith, where you said, okay, look, we'll carry on doing largely what we are doing. Okay. Mm-hmm. How did that work out?
Well, 8 days after having a C-section, I was hosting the TV coverage of Glastonbury. So that's kind of the extremes that I went to of doing it.
Okay. Wow.
But like I said, it was that thing where I was like,
no moshing, I hope.
Well,
or crowd surfing.
No,
yeah,
it was more a case of the wonderful Sally Wood, who was our producer at the time. I remember being up on the platform to the kind of, if you're looking out from the pyramid stage across to your right, and saying, Sal, how long are we on this performance for? Into, to my microphone, and in my ear I heard her saying 12 minutes. I'm like, I'll be back in 8, and waddling to a porta cabin to get my expressors out, to attach to my boobs, to express milk, to put in the little fridge that I'd bought at Argos, to stick my milk in, that I then took back to the B&B where my mum was with Rudy, so that she could then feed him that when I was on site the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was mental. And I remember the drive down to Glastonbury as well. It was that thing where, a baby, all a baby really needs is a clean nappy, a cuddle and some food. But our car was packed within an inch of its life of everything that a baby doesn't need in the first few days of its life. And we drove down to Glastonbury. We were staying in street in this little B&B. And Rudy cried the whole way down from London. It was his first car journey. And so you could imagine the tension, the sort of inner sort of tensions just building as you get down there sort of thing. And I was just thinking to myself, what have we done? Why have we brought this little... And then we got there. Tom had to pretty much throw me in the B&B. My mum arrived and he had to go and do a show, an editor's show, and film a warm-up show for Glastonbury. So he felt horrendous having to leave me. But I just remember him putting his hand on my arm and go, we did the right thing. It's going to be all right. And he was right.
Aww.
And I love that we can kind of talk about it now and tell Rudy that, and it's a brilliant story to tell him that, we kind of just took him with us. And since then we kind of have just taken them both, with us wherever we go. And it's just the plan inside, I would say, is the kind of the important part of it. But yeah, from that point on, really, and when we got through that, it's like, can kind of pretty much do anything if we did that.
Yeah, you can pretty much. Wow. Okay. I'm not going to try and ask you, Joe, to trump the 8 days after C-section Glastonbury.
Well, it wasn't a competition, believe me.
That's probably about when I was screaming at the top of the garden.
You're both having your own moments. Okay, right, 33 minutes past 1. Okay, now it is school runnings each and every Wednesday. We have the actor Joe Joyner with us. And that's because she has two 10-year-old twins. We also have the presenter, podcaster, DJ Edith Bowman, whose podcast Soundtracking is available on iTunes, and also Life Cinematic is going to be returned to BBC4 soon. So we will be keeping an eye out for that on your behalf and tell you when it is ready to drop. Do you have a date, Edith? When it's
Don't actually. We did. Can I tell? I don't know if I can tell. I'll probably tell you who we did last week. Can I?
Go on.
Sofia Coppola.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, On the Rocks is her new film with Bill Murray and Rashida Jones. So it's the first time she's been back working with Bill Murray since Lost in Translation. Well, she did a Christmas thing last year, but kind of proper film, Lost in Translation. And they're so great together, him and Rashida. It's father-daughter relationship. Yeah. It's really set in New York. It's really interesting, her take on New York and filming it. And yeah, it's really good. But she was amazing. The whole idea of the show is she goes back and picks a collection of films that have been inspirational to her, and it's an incredible collection. None of her dads, though. So.
No, well, that's good. That's got to be too obvious, wouldn't it? Talking of films, lots of people have texted in about watching inappropriate films, Joe and Edith, with their kids. Nihal, 43 years old here and raised on Paul Verhoeven films. I was given RoboCop on video for my 12th birthday. Still can't watch the scene at the start. Scarred for life. Kids in YouTube Kids, but are starting to stray films. I was given RoboCop on video for my 12th birthday. Still can't watch the scene at the start. Scarred for life. Kids are 7 and 9 here, so far ensconced in YouTube Kids, but are starting to stray into YouTube recently, which is always a worry, understandably so. Pam in Welwyn Garden City said, when our girls were about 8 and 10, we watched Working Girl on video. It suddenly came to a point where a door opened to reveal a man on top of a woman making active love. I love how Pam said making active love. What a phrase.
Just writing that down to use.
Just there you go. What's that for a chat line? We swiftly fast forward it so it turned into fast sex. Okay, isn't that
Brilliant.
One of the girls looked up to us and said, I think that was the lady we saw in the fur coat earlier, said Pam in Welwyn Garden City. I remember sitting down with Mum and Dad when we got our first video. Our old Auntie Betty came in to see the new technology too. Mum and Dad had hired Fatal Attraction. Ooh. The sink scene was enough to send my brother and me running for the door. Fatal Attraction with your Aunt Betty.
Proper steamy.
Now, I've
got such a terrible memory as well. It's always in danger of happening when we watch films. Like, I'll suggest something and I'll go, it's only a 12. My husband will go, no, there's that bit. And I've always forgotten it, but he remembers.
Ian has texted something in, which is so true, right? Watership Down is rated as a U. How many kids' lives are still in trauma because of that film?
Still haven't watched it since.
I can't watch that film again. You're right, Edith.
Even when you hear that song, Bright Eyes.
No, so true. That is so horrific. Apparently, Empire Strikes Back was a U in 1980 because the PG came out in 82. Brilliant film either way. So, yeah, that was a U as well.
Wow.
And
it's quite individual, though, isn't it? Because you were talking about Stranger Things earlier, watching it with your kids. I couldn't watch that on my own. We were halfway through it with my husband and I, the first series, and I think I went away to work. And because I was working away, he was like, I'm going to watch the next Stranger Things. Why don't you watch it? And we both watched it. I was like, there's no way I'm watching this on my own in this flat in Leeds. No. So I haven't watched that with the kids, and I don't.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know
so in about 2 or 3 years' time, your kids are going to be going, come on, Mum, it's okay. It's all right. Come on. We can stop at any time.
Christmas Day. Come on, I've got something for you to watch.
Come on, let's do it. Let's talk about soundtracks, given that Edith is with us on School Runnings this week. And we've talked about the brilliant podcast Soundtracking. So we want you to tell us about the music that reminds of us our families and our homes. Edith, growing up in such a large family, what were the songs that were playing at the time?
It's really funny because I grew up, so my this big family, we had this little family-run little hotel in Scotland, and we all worked in it, chambermaiding and waitressing. And on a Saturday night, there was a dinner dance, and
DJ or covers band?
A covers band.
Perfect.
And the set didn't change in 15 years, I think.
Wow.
So I remember like waitressing, and even like when I would
Did they
even
change the running order of the tracks, or did they just stay?
No.
Right, okay.
And I remember even like, so, once I started doing TV and radio and stuff, and I would go home, I would still work. I would still, on Christmas Day, I'd still go back and waitress on Christmas Day and stuff like that. It was brilliant. But we'd always be in the pantry in the hotel, and as all the waitresses, and we'd be like singing the next line of the song before it came in, like, because we knew the kind of the repertoire. So, but it's things like that. So whenever I hear like On the Road Again or all that kind of stuff, and all these kind of couples waltzing sort of around this dance floor, it was so old school, but it was such a lovely, lovely thing. So there's certain songs from that kind of whole era that just transport me and make me kind of happy from the inside out.
What are those songs?
So Willie Nelson, On the Road Again, Rhinestone Cowboy, all that kind of stuff, and Creedence Clearwater Revival, and just a really good kind of like, but they would be almost kind of ballroom danced up, so that they could either waltz or quick step to it or jive to it, or yes, there's that. And then for my lot as well, the Mandalorian theme has basically been our soundtrack for lockdown.
Okay.
We engulfed that show.
It's amazing.
Oh, it's so good.
We're only a month away, aren't we? From
I know, the
season
new
2?
one. I'm so excited.
I know, it's you and me both.
And there's the
Freaking
little
out.
galleries films that they gave you as well. So as well as these great episodes, they have all these kind of behind the scenes little films that we just engulfed. It was brilliant. And so that there we go. It's like, come on, we can take on the day. Another COVID day, come on, bring it on. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Lockdown with the Mandalorian.
exactly. And my little 7-year-old, he's got a kind of, they both love music in different ways in terms of playing it and things. And he wanted to learn a brass instrument, and my mother-in-law had a clarinet in the house. And so she was like, oh, Spike, it's really difficult to get a sound out of a clarinet. And I'm like, so she put it together for him and showed him what to do with the reed and stuff. And next thing, we left him there for like a couple of hours for her to go and do some stuff. Came back, and he's in the living room going on this clarinet, and it's like, oh my god, this is amazing! Yeah, and
That's so good.
yeah, so I love that show. I love everything about it, and I also love what it reminds me of us all being snuggled up together in this, whilst the world is just, kind of breaking down around us, but it makes me feel safe and happy, really.
Oh, that's so good. Joe, what about the soundtrack of your youth? Was the music that was going in?
Do you know, mate, that's reminded me of how we used to have my nan's, you guys will know more about this being music people. What were the things before the black LPs? They had these really fat, brittle, yellow things. They were a form of record that just was, there was no flexibility in it.
Yeah, weirdly enough, Radio 1, we didn't have any.
No, you weren't. But this is...
Edison
like Fisher Price records
Edison
that you would put on
not
the...
that one. I did have that. That was brilliant. I love that.
Exactly, yeah.
No, this is this is the one before LPs, and they were brittle and they were yellow. And my nan had Doris Day, and so when she'd moved house, we had her old machine that played these, and I used to just have it on repeat with my dressing up clothes, singing. And so much vibrato in those old records, and I used to just sing "Que Sera Sera" a lot, and "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," floating about in the living room to my nan's Doris Day records.
Oh my God, that's idyllic. That's absolutely the experience you should be having.
Were you dressing up as Doris Day from your dressing up box as well?
I was dressing up in this very big, long blue petticoat thing that was the frilliest thing in there. Yeah, I don't know whether Doris Day ever wore that. Who knew?
My entire childhood was soundtracked by Terry Wogan on Radio 2. That was just always on. So anything like by Dr. Hook.
Oh, my dad loved Doctor Who.
Yes.
My mum used to dress up as Tina Turner as well. She used to do an amazing kind of like lip sync Tina Turner.
Brilliant.
And we'd have friends who would get her to do it at weddings and stuff as well, because she was so great at it. My mum's a really kind of like, one of my earliest memories is watching my mum be Nancy and Oliver and thinking that Bill Sykes had killed my mum, and my dad going, it's just pretend. And so she was just, I think if she'd taken another route, she would have been an actress or a performer in some way. But she absolutely nailed Tina. And so whenever I hear Simply the Best, it's my mum. It's like, yes, go on, Ellie.
Do you have
We had a lot of Tina in our house growing up, to be fair.
Do you have
I think we lost my brother at her concert once. That was a bit distressing. Mum and Dad took us to a Tina Turner concert at Woburn Abbey, and my brother, who worried about getting lost anyway, as it was, somehow.
How old was he?
He was 13. He was 13, so he was 12 or 13. But it's big at a concert, right? Even if you're 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So I think he'd been sent off to get a drink and then just lost us. And, you know, we spent that was it. The whole concert was spent looking for my brother, who we found by the car in the car park at the end of the night.
I'm not making any judgment here, but obviously I've got a kid who's nearly 13. There is no way I'm sending him off on his own. He's just, he would never find his way.
You have made a judgment, but I think it's quite a fair one.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just like, wow. But do you know what?
I'm not getting a drink. Tina's on.
But this is interesting, because this also comes up in Ramesh's book, and Ramesh Ranganathan is on the show later on, about how more liberal our parents were with us than we are with our own kids.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
Totally. There's no way, and yet they've got phones now and everything. But still, there's some things that I would never let mine do that I was allowed to.
It's the thing, isn't it? It's like, I'm going to get a drink in front of like tens of thousands of people. Yeah, go on, off you go, son. Whereas me, I'm like, whoa, okay, what are we doing here? I'm getting a satellite lined up.
Can't see you. Where are you?
Yeah, exactly that. As opposed to my mum. Yeah, you're going off wandering around fields and forests for 7 hours. All right, look, just food is at 5:30. Just get back for that, yeah?
Absolutely. I was thinking about that during the summer holidays as well. Like, you know, my mum and dad worked. The summer was so busy. You know, it was a busy time at the hotel with everyone. So it was kind of, you'd have breakfast together, then you would just go out, and then you'd be back at tea time, sort of thing. That was it. And you just.
And when was the last time you two did that, Edith?
Never.
Yeah, exactly right. Mine either.
It's because I want to go and hang out. I'm like, I'll come.
That's trying to find that. I don't know why the pendulum swung so far the other way.
Yeah,
I think ignorance is bliss. I don't you feel like now that you wonder how we made it through our childhood, really, because everybody that we ever idolised turned out to be a paedophile, and that wasn't even the people on our doorstep. So I think that we just we know so much more now about just how horrific some people can be, that we're just all paranoid, holding maybe a bit too tight.
Yes, that is true. I mean, just letting them wander off into a forest for 5 hours. Like, it's just never. Even thinking about it is making me feel weird. I just wonder though, if people listening to 5 Live now, if you're in the countryside, whether that's just slightly different than living in a city. And
we live out.
I am in the countryside.
Yeah,
you're both in the countryside. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow! So, and you neither of you allow it to happen, even though those fields are on your doorstep.
They definitely play out more than they would, but they play out in safety in numbers, isn't it? So they play out in a group, and if there's a sort of rule, if the older boys are there as well, then you know a certain amount of them they can, and there's different restrictions to it. But there's definitely more freedom than we would be allowing if they were in a town.
Yeah. I don't know, because so we come back. We only moved out of town just before Christmas, and so we kind of went back in all the time, and the kids come and see their friends and stuff. And there's been a couple of times that Rudy's come back into town, and he's just hung out with his mates, wandering about North London sort of thing. And it's kind of weird, whereas I'm not sure how he would do that where we are. I'd like to have to drive him somewhere, drop him off, and then kind of come back from it. It's interesting. I don't know whether it's maybe a kind of smaller condensed area. There's people around. I don't know, but I almost feel like he had a bit more exploration independently when we were in London than we do out in the country.
That's interesting, but maybe the longer you're there, the more of a community you'll get to know. Because we're definitely on a street where there's a lot of kids that all know each other, all went to the same school, so it's maybe a bit easier.
If you see a giant wicker-shaped man, stay away from that. Not stereotyping, but, can happen. Okay, still film text coming in. Hi, Nihal. My girlfriend, now wife, and I house sat at my brother's farm when we were 25 years old with my mum. We were alone on top of a windblown hill, and it was late autumn. That evening, with the fire lit and dinner consumed, the three of us decided to watch a video. Rooting through my brother's vast collection, we found the VHS of Reservoir Dogs, which my mum knew nothing of, and my girlfriend and I had watched years before, and had kind of forgotten the details. A great film, said I. The three of us duly sat down and began watching it. slowly it began to dawn on me that we were heading for, I see he's got his films mixed up. This is Pulp Fiction he's thinking of, not Reservoir Dogs. Because he said it began to dawn on me that we were heading for the GIMP scene.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
certain what
Willis.
to do. I decided to just get through it. As we found ourselves in the basement with the GIMP being released, we all felt very uncomfortable. My mum, who is not easily shocked, quietly said, "This does not cross the generation gap." What a fantastic way of putting it.
Great.
We turned it off. I've not completely recovered even today. Yeah, so watching Pulp Fiction with your mum. I mean, come on, you can't. That's not even the worst of it. The language of Samuel L. Jackson, if you're looking at it, wow. Okay. Denise in Chester said, I was taken to the cinema age 6 to see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It traumatised me completely. I was terrified of the child catcher and convinced it would all happen for real. I never allowed my own children to watch it till they were much older, and they laughed at me, couldn't understand why I was scared. Well, that's another thing, isn't it? It's taken to, this is the thing going back to Watership Down, right? Oh, as kids, it's a cartoon about rabbits. What could possibly be traumatising about that? Apparently, Inflexible Yellow Records were just 78s. They were called 78s.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm glad somebody answered.
Someone's texted in. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, we're running out of time. And we want to talk about escapism because it's something we're all in need of at the moment, and finding the options for us to be escapist, well, kind of contracting upon us. Do you, Joe, and your family have anything that helps to distract you? What do you guys do as escapism?
Oh, do you know, I was thinking about this, lots of things, apart from the obvious watching films and stuff. We do play a lot of cards. The kids, you know, we can be up with them till 2 a.m, sometimes playing rummy on holiday.
Nice. For money?
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
cool.
you know, yeah.
Toys?
It's, yeah. And walks. Obviously, we're in the country, so we'll do a lot of big walks, big bike rides and things. And then my son is learning guitar. One of the lovely things about lockdown was obviously the chance to all be a bit more in touch with what the kids are learning and what they're actually doing at school, because, you know, we were having to do it.
Yes.
And so I got to listen in on his lessons because he was having Zoom guitar lessons, and I hadn't heard him play properly for ages. I'd missed the kind of school concerts and things from work, and he's brilliant. And so together we were able, because I play the piano, we were able to suggest things that he would learn. And I was saying to him, well, if you learn that song, I've got the sheet music, we can play that together. And so we've had some really lovely moments music wise, which, you know, because like most people who play an instrument, I've neglected that as I've got older, and, you know, so he's reignited it a bit, which has been lovely.
That's beautiful. You get
It's
that
lovely.
moments together. Well, there's a fair bit of music in your family, to be fair, Edith.
Yeah, there's a bit. It's lovely, actually. I think it's amazing what the music, what their kind of Spike plays drums and the mandolin on clarinet, and then and Rudy's got this kind of composing sort of thing in him where he just likes to kind of make up things on the piano, and he's got a great piano teacher, Mr. Mander, who kind of encourages him and gives him themes to kind of write things around, which is really nice.
That's lovely.
But our main point of escapism, we just got a dog a week ago.
Oh, congratulations.
I'm jealous. I'm so
first-
jealous.
You paid 7 times more than you would have done in February for a puppy.
I've never had a dog. I've got allergies, you see, like really quite intense. So there's a bit of a journey to getting the dog and working out what was going to be the right one to get, and going to hang out with him for a bit to see if I'd be all right with it and things. And yes, we've had him a week, and I genuinely think that there's obviously a little bit of kind of, are we doing this right? How do we train him? What do we do? Is he going to pee on the kitchen floor again?
Yes.
All that kind of stuff. But
What kind of dog?
He's a Portuguese water dog.
What?
Googling
now.
Same as Barack Obama's dogs, basically.
What?
Is he
They
big,
look like
brown?
Ewoks.
They're quite, yes,
They look
yes,
like
I know.
Ewoks. He looks
gorgeous.
We have a little Ewok running around our garden at the minute. He's so cute. We've called him River, the kind of water connection.
Yes.
And I do think he's instilled an element of kind of calm. And, you know, as the winter approaches, it'll be lovely to have something to kind of put our focus and attention on as a family, to kind of help and nurture and teach. And
Oh my gosh, the puppies are so cute. My gosh.
Are you exhausted like a new parent though?
Well, I'm trying to find lots of wood to touch, because Tom, bless him, was like, he's read so many books about it and wants to make sure he does, you know, everything kind of as best we can. Within like 2 nights, he was sleeping through the night. And so we put him to bed at like 11, say, night, Revs. And then like this morning, I went in at 6:30 and took him out for a wee and a number 2. And yeah, he was just there. His little head pops up. Morning.
So chewing?
Oh,
stuff?
yeah, chewing and a bit of biting. But a bit of that.
And the kid. And what about the? So a mate of mine, was this the kids that drove this? Were they pressuring you to get a dog?
Rudy has always been a big kind of animal and nature thing. He wants to be a wildlife photographer, is what he said he wants to do. Amazing. And so there's always been this thing about having pets, and they always kind of look at me and go, oh, but Mum's allergic. And I just didn't want to be that person of them not being able to experience that thing. And I'd never had it. I'd never had a pet. I had lots of friends who had, grew up with pets and stuff. Tom always had dogs. And his last dog was called Nobby. And the kids...
Imagine shouting that across a park.
So great. So the kids, since we moved out, everybody's got a dog out in the country. So there's been so much talk about it. And then the talk became more kind of regular and constant. And we had this dog follow us home one day, and the kids renamed it Noblet. But
again, shouting that across the park.
Yeah, we had to phone its owner because it was pretty much following us right home. And then we just did some research and looked into the kind of allergy thing. And I mean, he is just a ball of fluff as opposed to a ball of fur.
Is the dog allowed to sleep on the kid's bed?
No.
Wow.
Because of the allergy thing as well, we're kind of keeping him downstairs so that there's a part of the house that...
Oh, wow.
I'm just going to say this, week 1.
Yeah.
You're in week 1.
Yeah.
Come back to me in like another week.
Yeah. We pledged that the dog was never going to sleep on a bed, and it does now all the time. In fact, I've got about 1/8 of the bed. Dog's got about 2/3 of the bed. It's outrageous. And it's still a puppy, and it's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, so it's going to be outrageous. Jo Joyner and Edith Bowman, we ran out of time. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
You.
Thank you so much.